Hello everyone, Cowbunger here, and today I'm going to talk about what I think a PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale sequel roster could look like. I think PlayStation has a strong brand right now despite the PlayStation 5's kinda lackluster lineup of exclusive games at the moment. The PlayStation 4 was a success at least, and now would be a good time to look back at its success with a crossover platform fighter. I'm not going to talk about anything else besides the roster here because this video is set to be pretty dang long as is. So let's talk about the roster size. The first game had 24 characters to play in total, including some DLC characters. For a sequel, you'd hope that the starting roster will be bigger than this, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a 32 character roster. This number lets me add all the essential characters that I wanted to add. Just for fun, I also have 6 DLC characters to throw in just to seal the deal and make this the best roster it can be. So when we are done, there will be 38 characters in this roster. One thing that PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale did in its arcade mode was assign each character a rival. I will bring this back because seeing rivals interact is extremely fun. With those preliminaries out of the way, let's hurry and begin. To start the roster, we gotta get the most obvious pick out of the way. It's Kratos from God of War. He's a returning character and one of the most recognizable PlayStation characters. Boom. Now in the last game, his rival was Sweet Tooth. It was kinda random, but they made it work. I think we can do better than that though with another returning character. It's Dante from Devil May Cry. And not the crappy one, it's the one we all love with white hair and the red jacket. Dante is a beloved protagonist and another hack and slash icon like Kratos. I think these two personalities would clash against each other. Kratos is a very serious, no-nonsense character. Dante, meanwhile, is a charismatic, carefree quipster who would definitely make Kratos angry. It wouldn't even be intentional, but it would break down when Dante tells Kratos to stop taking life so seriously, and then they'd start threatening each other. That feels like what should have happened in the first game, but better late than never. Let's address Sweet Tooth. Will he join the roster? Yes, he will, because the Twisted Metal show exists, so Sweet Tooth is relevant enough. Who will his rival be? Well, I've got a newcomer for him. This newcomer will match the psychotic weirdness of Sweet Tooth to make an interesting matchup. Please welcome Higgs from Death Stranding to the roster. Higgs is the main antagonist of Death Stranding. He is essentially a cult leader who uses tar manipulation and firepower to try to bring the extinction of humanity. Hey, both of these guys have masks, both were driven to insanity, and both have committed some effed up atrocities. These two are a perfect match. I bet these guys could actually get along if they gave each other a chance, but I'd have to guess that one's going to be disgusted by the other in some way, and that will start the friction needed for a fight. One thing I want to address is which Higgs they'd end up using because it seems like his design is different between the first game and the upcoming sequel. I'd say it's probably going to be the sequel version, but there should be an option for him to use his getup from the first game. Higgs has a guitar that shoots lightning now, so they gotta use that in the moveset. Let's bring in some more newcomers for our next pair. Naturally, since God of War is one of the most popular PlayStation exclusive series, we should bring in another character to represent it. God of War's recent games have focused on the growth of Kratos' son, Atreus. If you don't know, this kid is actually Loki, the god of mischief. Now, he's not quite developed into a formidable god at this point, but he still has some things that could give him a cool moveset. He uses multiple different kinds of arrows for his bow, he can summon spirits to help him fight, and he can shapeshift into animals. Now, who is the boy gonna beef with? Well, it's gotta be a girl who has also had to learn to survive with a bow and arrow against enemies far stronger than her. It is Ellie from The Last of Us. Now canonically, this is a complete curb stomp in favor of Atreus, but these characters are both clever, have close bonds with their father figures, and both get aggressive when their loved ones are in danger. While they would probably have a mutual respect for each other, if they had to fight in order to get back their loved ones, they would. Let's bring back another must-have character to the roster, Nathan Drake from Uncharted. The world's most lovable treasure hunter is back, as the Uncharted games are still very recognizable despite the lack of a new entry in years. Nathan's rival in the first game was Sly Cooper, a very good choice. We'll need a heavy hitter to live up to that matchup, and I've got just the gal for the job. Introducing Lara Croft from Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider has also had plenty of love on PlayStation throughout the year, so it's only fair for her to make her debut in this game. Of course, Lara Croft is also a treasure hunter, so I'd imagine that if treasure was on the line, the two would fight to see who's the more skilled survivor. Since I brought him up, yes, Sly Cooper is coming back. He is still a beloved character despite there not being a new entry in the series for over a decade now. That is sad. But that's why it's important for him to appear in these types of things, to remind the world that he is still around and loved. For Sly Cooper's arrival this time around, I think I've got another thief that can square up to him. It is the Phantom Thief, Joker. Persona 5 was a timed exclusive for a long time, and no doubt helped the PlayStation 4 sell with its groundbreaking visuals, amazing gameplay, and story. Joker is also in Smash, so that makes him a pretty big deal. As for why these two would fight, it might come down to this. Morgana and Sly instigate things, and the thing that sets Joker off is Sly questioning if he's really a thief or not because he doesn't believe in Morgana's stories. They seem too far-fetched, even for a walking, talking raccoon. Alright, it's time to have some fun. Up next, we got what is probably the biggest addition to the roster so far. It is Spider-Man. The recent Spider-Man games have been amongst the most successful PlayStation exclusives in recent memory. It would feel weird for Spider-Man to not make an appearance in the sequel. His rival is making his debut from a series that was represented in the last game. It is Dr. Nefarious from Ratchet & Clank. Dr. Nefarious is one of the most memorable villains from PlayStation's catalog of exclusives. He is just the perfect over-the-top comedic villain to bounce off of Ratchet & Clank's heroic natures. I feel like this dynamic can carry over to Spider-Man as well. He has similarities to Ratchet, being a smart quipster that Nefarious would probably get annoyed towards. Plus, I'm sure Insomniac would love to make this matchup a reality. Speaking of Ratchet & Clank, we can't not have them on the roster. They are probably just one of the most consistently good franchises PlayStation has under its belt. Their rivals in the last game were Jak and Daxter, which is pretty much perfect. We could just do it again, but that would be kinda lame, wouldn't it? I'm trying not to do duplicate rivalries for arcade mode, so that means we gotta find someone else for Ratchet & Clank. While I think that what I've come up with isn't nearly as good as Jak and Daxter, I think it's important for this character to fit in somewhere. Or rather this game. Whoever comes from it doesn't really matter as much, but Destiny 2 does need to be a part of this game in some way. It is one of the most successful shooters in the last console generation. PlayStation acquired Bungie, so they will want something from them to be in this game. To me, the best candidate to fight Ratchet & Clank seemed to be Dominus Gall. He was the final boss of Destiny 2, and he uses light attacks that do damage over time, and has a jetpack. He would be an interesting big body character to add to the roster. He could be a unique challenge for Ratchet & Clank too. Ratchet would look at Gall as another baddie from the galaxy he needs to take down, and Gall would probably highly underestimate Ratchet. Jak and Daxter will return to this roster as well. They are beloved legacy characters, so there's no reason to boot them. For the rival this time around, we'll get another person who has to balance the good and bad in themselves. It is time for Delsin Rowe from Infamous Second Son. This game actually sold very well and was pretty well received, so I think it's fair for it to be represented. Plus, Cole was a part of the first game, so we should try to keep franchises intact whenever possible. These lads will likely fight over some comments Daxter makes about Delsin. Daxter should always be the one who starts fights. Daxter's quips would clash with Delsin's arrogance, and they would jaw-jack from there. Up next, I have a newcomer that has been making waves on PlayStation recently. It is Aloy from the Horizon series. Horizon has become a staple series for PlayStation in the last decade, and it would feel wrong for Aloy to be excluded in a game like this. For Aloy's rival, I have something that doesn't make sense on the surface, but I think it could be funny in execution. I am bringing Sir Daniel Fortescue back as Aloy's rival. Of course, Sir Daniel Fortescue deserves to be back. The remake of Medieval was very successful. Now, he is Aloy's rival purely because of how polar opposites these two are. Aloy is a regular human being who normally fights robotic beasts. Meanwhile, Sir Daniel is a walking cartoon skeleton who normally fights the undead. Aloy would take one look at Sir Daniel and be like, "What the hell is that?" Naturally, Sir Daniel would be very offended and start giving Aloy a piece of his mind. Aloy has no idea what he's saying though, and just decides she needs to take him out. And on top of that, she uses a bow and arrow, which would definitely give Sir Daniel some PTSD. Let's get another veteran on the roster. It's time for Parappa the Rapper. Who doesn't love Parappa the Rapper? Parappa got a remaster in 2017, so I guess that warrants him staying, along with just being a very unique character. For his rival this time around, let's get another PlayStation 1 icon in on the fun. It's Spectre from Ape Escape. So in the first game, Parappa's rival was Spike. I thought it would be fun to bring in the antagonist of Ape Escape as a playable character this time around. His abilities and his boss fights would translate well into a fighting game. Parappa could remember the monkeys from the first game, and maybe he mistakes Spectre for Spike. Spectre would be offended by that and vow to destroy Parappa. Let's do a fight between two third-party characters next, because that will be fun. Let's start with a character who is a newcomer, but is representing a series from the last game. A new challenger approaches. It's Jin Kazuma from Tekken. Jin is becoming the main character of Tekken, so it makes sense for him to replace Heihachi in this instance. He'll probably end up becoming a cooler character anyway. For his rival, I've got the dream match of all time. If this doesn't end up happening in Tekken 8 first, I'd be surprised honestly, but it needs to be done whenever possible. Jin's rival is Kazuma Kiryu from Yakuza. They are both muscular Japanese men who are expert fighters caught in ridiculous situations. Kiryu leans more on the side of justice, so I don't think he'd like Jin very much. I'm gonna have a fight between two PlayStation platforming mascots next. First is Astrobot, a newcomer. Astrobot has been in two PlayStation games, and I think PlayStation kinda likes the guy. I think a good foil for him would be Sackboy. Sackboy is returning, and these two are the type where I definitely see them getting along. But for the purposes of making them rivals, maybe the scenario could just be them being so similar that they mimic each other. Eventually, they both hurt each other by accident, then they both get mad, and then the fight begins. It's time for another matchup between two third-party characters. This is just something I've got to do. It's a fight between two of my favorite video game characters. It does kind of make sense. I promise I'm not just doing it for the sake of it. But for our first character, we have a newcomer. One that was very synonymous with PlayStation in the past and is playing a huge role with them now. We have Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. We are stealing more characters from Smash, baby. But let's be real, if there were to be any overlap between both the rosters, Cloud and Joker being the characters to do so makes sense. There's not going to be any more overlap now. It feels pretty necessary to get Cloud in there considering what's going on with the remakes and new Final Fantasy titles on PlayStation. As for Cloud's rival, you gotta hear me out. It would be so awesome, it would be so cool if it was Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil. Again, this is a matchup where Cloud would whoop Leon as capable as Leon is, but we don't care about that too much. This is going to be a clash of the two edgy boys who try their hardest to be the coolest. Every angsty emo teen who had a MySpace in 2007 will reawaken at the sight of these two in the same room. It'd be great if they even leaned into them trying too hard to be cool. Like at some point they just start trying to outcool each other by posing or something. I need it, man, I need it. This next matchup feels mandatory once you think about it, because up next we are covering one of the most influential subgenres in recent gaming history. We are talking about Souls-likes, and if we're talking about Souls-likes, then we've got to be talking about a playable character from Demon Souls. They are called the Slayer of Demons. And for their rival, it will be the playable character of Bloodborne, known as the Hunter. Both of these guys could use some of the fan favorite weapons from their games to create fun movesets. As for their rival cutscene, I just kinda see them circling around each other until they both stance up. This would be the only cutscene where neither character exchanges words, and that just feels right in this instance. Next, we have a rivalry that is just the most obvious thing on planet Earth, yet we somehow never got it in the first game. Both of these characters were missing from the first game, which is crazy. Both of these characters already have history with one another. They kind of just show up in each other's games all the time, so they are just intrinsically linked. And both of these characters are arguably the most important PlayStation characters in its history. It is Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. What else do we need to talk about here? Nothing? Okay, let's move on. Our last matchup for the base roster is a banger. First, we have a returning character, one that is pretty relevant still, but mainly because of memes. That is Raiden from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Raiden is a beast. He was a fun pick last time, so we gotta run it back. And for his rival, we're gonna give him a swordsman worthy to face him. One that could be disciplined enough to adapt to a foe that is superhuman in every way. That warrior will be Lord Jin Sakai from Ghost of Tsushima. Jin has a variety of tools at his disposal that he can use to dictate the flow of battle. The lightning quick Raiden would have to locate Jin in order to fight him, and Jin would not make it easy. Jin lends himself to being a stance character that either fights up close with honor or from afar with bombs and arrows. If Jin could keep up, he could strike as quickly as Raiden could. Maybe these two could fight because Jin senses that Raiden is not honorable and has a muddy past. Raiden could get angry and question if Jin has his morals correct himself. Both would call each other's bluffs and they would duel to see whose path has led them to being stronger. So that is our base roster. Not bad at all if I do say so myself. We still have 6 characters to go for DLC though. Most of these picks will focus on adding a big character alongside a first party property so that people are encouraged to buy the DLC for that one big character. Rivalries will still be in effect. This first DLC will be one for the hardcore gamers out there. First we have William from Nioh. Nioh is a PlayStation hit, so I think that means PlayStation sees it in a pretty high regard. The Nioh games are very well liked by people who play them, so there's no reason to not have William here. As for his rival, we're going to grab someone that has one of the most iconic PlayStation games ever. We're double dipping with franchises once again, because Nemesis from Resident Evil will be William's rival. I really wanted a Resident Evil antagonist on the roster. There are so many good ones to choose from, but I ultimately went with the one with the most disgusting outward appearance. The rival scenario could involve William comparing Nemesis to a yokai, and Nemesis could just get mad that Stars isn't around or something. The next DLC character I have is from a franchise that was actually DLC in the first game, but for this roster we are picking someone different to represent the series. It is Raven from Gravity Rush. Raven is a capable gravity shifter that has acted as a foil to Cat. She is an important character within the series and her boss fights give her great potential as a fighter. Gravity Rush still has a bit of a cult following, so continuing to represent it in this game is important. I didn't want to repeat Cat as a DLC character because that just doesn't feel right, and as soon as you see Raven's rival, you will understand why Raven couldn't just be in the base roster. I acknowledge that this is a crazy pick, but it does make sense. Raven's rival is Darth Revan from Star Wars Knight of the Old Republic. You already know that a Star Wars character can be nothing less than DLC. Why is Revan here though? Well, first of all, this is Raven versus Revan. I am a genius! Second of all, Knights of the Old Republic is getting a remake next year. It will be a timed PlayStation exclusive, but the good thing about it being a remake is that the characters in the game are already established and ready to add to the roster. So why not get Revan, the playable character, in the roster? Who doesn't want a Star Wars character in their crossover game if it makes sense to do so? You don't have a rebuke to that. And if you do, well, don't say it in the comments, otherwise I'll look dumb. But yeah, both of these characters can manipulate other people's gravity in their own and unique ways, and both have interesting intentions in their games, so why not, man? I think their rivalry cutscene could just focus on their differing journeys. Raven started off as an antagonist turned ally, while Darth Revan went from the light to the dark side. The last DLC I have here is for a character that people will probably be clamoring for at this point. It's Venom. Venom will sell like hotcakes, so he will be DLC. Simple as that. Getting another rep from Spider-Man makes sense too. It's just been too successful for it not to be earned. As for Venom's rival, it's going to be a weird one to hear, but I have decided to go with Selene from Returnal. During her very weird predicament, Selene has to use her intellect and unique weapons to destroy horrific creatures beyond comprehension. Venom is a pretty scary guy himself, so I like to think that if he and Selene cross paths, Selene would see him as another monster at first. After a conversation, Selene might change her tone slightly about Venom, but still declare him a threat that has to be taken out. That does it. Here is the entire roster I've made for a PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale sequel. I'd say this roster has its fair share of iconic picks and unexpected picks, which is a mark of a good roster, right guys? We can't have too many safe picks now, can we? That is in reference to comments that I've gotten about my Nick All-Star Brawl 2 roster, and I must say, that roster was more of an experiment than anything else. Since I don't really care too much about what a Nick fighting game roster could look like, mainly because of how many choices there are, I decided just to make a safe roster since I saw so many people complain about obvious picks not being chosen when the leaks first popped up. And lo and behold, as soon as I made a safe roster, I heard the complete opposite and the roster was boring and needed more off-the-cuff picks. I mean, some people liked it, but most people disregarded the idea I had behind that roster. So basically, all the whining that I saw before the game came out became irrelevant as soon as people actually got used to the roster, apparently. I'm saying all this to basically reiterate that nobody can make a perfect roster for a fighting game. Everyone has different tastes, so before you go and comment, remember that your opinion is just that, an opinion. Don't be acting like your roster ideas are objectively better because that was kind of annoying the first time you guys did that. With that being said, I welcome opinions on the roster, and I would like to know who you guys would like to see in a PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale sequel. For me, the playable character of Elden Ring was really close to getting in. Are there any characters that I cut that you would have kept? R.I.P. Fat Princess, you will be missed. And let me know what kind of roster I should make for next time. There are plenty of opportunities for corporations to take advantage of the Smash Bros. Hype train if they want to. It's an effective way to make money, do fan service, and advertise at the same time. And again, just be reasonable about it. I know asking strangers on the internet to do that is a tall task, but I like to cultivate some positive discussion whenever I do these types of videos. Leave a like if you haven't done so yet, by the way. I would appreciate it. If you like me so much that you want to give me money, well, I say there's either something wrong with you or that you're too kind. But I have memberships on so you can get exclusive perks like a large collection of exclusive video content, regular videos one day early, funny emojis, and more. If you don't want to pay a subscription, I have a Ko-fi page that links a bunch of ways that you can donate to me. If you do, you can get my exclusive video content that way too. Alright, I'm done blabbing. I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.